Work here too long, is it? Answering back.
What's going on?
You're preparing for Raya. What else?
At this hour, really?
Oh, you're a light sleeper.
Yes. So can you please do this later?
Where will we find the time? It's Khalid's first Raya. It will be bigger. More people will be coming. I bought new baju for Khalid. I want all our relatives to come and meet him.
Can we just have a quiet Raya? It's been exhausting.
Quiet Raya? Whoever heard of that?
Download the Toggle app now and catch up for free.
Kin. Brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric StarMax Air Conditioner. Next week on Kin.
Now you hire a replacement mother.
It's safer than living into your blind traditions. This is my house. You don't have to live here if you think I'm such a big problem. Derek.
I thought you were coming to the hospital. Why did you have to butt your nose into this?
Go! Wait, what's going on?
Kin. Weeknights at 8:30 p.m. on 5. You can watch it first on Toggle. Brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric StarMax Air Conditioner.
Tonight on 5.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards, and here are the top stories on News 5.
Attitudes on both sides have been hardening.
PM Lee says this development between the US and China is worrying and stresses the need for both to work together to update the global order. Mr. Lee also emphasizes the importance of multilateralism for small states like Singapore and how it can deepen collective growth and stem growing instability. On-demand public bus services will not be expanded beyond a trial for now, after the authorities cite concerns over high costs. And also coming up later in the program. Can you spot the hidden message in PUB's latest tear-jerking short film? Try to figure it out a little later. Minister Lee Hsien Loong hopes the US and China can find a constructive way forward in their relationship and cooperate on major issues of mutual interest, even as they compete against each other. Well, he also says while it's unrealistic to expect every country to adopt the same cultural values and political system, there is much that countries can learn from one another. Well, PM Lee was delivering the keynote address just a short while ago at the Shangri-La Dialogue, where US-China ties are expected to take center stage. The three-day security summit sees dozens of defense leaders meet to discuss security challenges in the region. And Mr. Lee said China's growth has shifted the strategic balance and economic center of gravity of the world. And this new reality is something that China and the rest of the world must adapt to. But he said the US, as the preeminent power, has the most difficult adjustment to make. He stressed that it is important for both countries to work together and with others to bring the global system up to date and not upended. Now, Mr. Lee said attitudes on both sides have been hardening, but he also noted the powerful domestic pressures they face. He said the situation now is a zero-sum dynamic, which makes it very hard to construct an agreement that is politically acceptable to both. But it is in both parties' interest to reach such an accommodation. Now, Mr. Lee also called for reform of multilateral institutions, among them the World Trade Organization, which hasn't kept up with economic realities. He said the U.S. has lost faith in the WTO and, as a result, prefers to negotiate bilateral deals one-on-one against smaller countries in tests of strength. But he said Singapore cannot afford the same point of view. As a small country, it needs to reform and strengthen multilateral institutions, not cripple or block them. Now, looking at PM Lee's speech in detail now, he says that the United States and China need to work together to update, not upend the global system. In his keynote address to the Shangri-La Dialogue, Mr. Lee said stresses and strains have built up between the two countries, especially in the area of trade. He said both powers need to understand each other's point of view and reconcile their interests, and that while China's growth has benefited the world, it has also shifted the strategic balance and economic center of gravity.
China has to recognize that it's in a totally new situation, created by its own success. It can no longer expect to be treated in the same way as in the past, when it was much smaller and weaker. China may still be decades away from becoming a fully developed, advanced country, but it cannot wait decades before taking on larger responsibilities. Having gained much from the international system, China now has a substantial stake in upholding it and making it work for the global community. Chinese leaders have spoken up strongly in support of globalization and a rules-based international order. China must now convince other countries through its actions that it does not take a transactional and mercantilist approach, but rather an enlightened and inclusive view of its long-term interests.
Well, Mr. Lee also said it is in China's interest to implement timely changes that bring about greater reciprocity and parity with its trading partners. Similarly, it should resolve disputes such as overlapping claims in the South China Sea through diplomacy, rather than force or the threat of force. But Mr. Lee said the rest of the world must also adjust to a larger role for China and accept that it is neither possible nor wise to prevent its growth.
The United States, being the preeminent power, has the most difficult adjustment to make. But however difficult the task, it is well worth the US forging a new understanding that will integrate China's aspirations within the current system of rules and norms. New international rules need to be made in many areas, including trade and intellectual property, cybersecurity, and social media. China will expect a say in this process because it sees the present rules as having been created in the past without its participation. And this is an entirely reasonable expectation.
PM Lee also touched on the hardening of attitudes in the US and China against each other, which he said is worrying. He said negative sentiments in the US against China have spread through the establishment. And even among businessmen, China's usual supporters, all goodwill has been lost. As for China, it is rejecting what's seen as the US imposing its values. And this, coupled with strong nationalistic fervor, means few would think more positively of US intentions.
The fundamental problem between the US and China is a mutual lack of strategic trust. This bodes ill for any compromise or peaceful accommodation. But to go down the present path would be a serious mistake on both sides. There is no strategic inevitability about a US-China face-off. But at the same time, if such a face-off does happen, it will be nothing like the Cold War.
Mr. Lee urged the US and China to settle their differences, even amid strong domestic pressure in both countries, especially with many Americans losing faith in globalization and China's mounting internal pressures, such as rural poverty and an aging population. While these pressures make it hard for political leaders to come up with solutions, Mr. Lee said it is their responsibility to prevent the extreme consequences of souring relations.
Even short of outright conflict, a prolonged period of tension and uncertainty would be extremely damaging. Many serious international problems, like the Korean situation, nuclear non-proliferation, and climate change cannot be tackled without the full participation of the US and China, together with other countries. In economic terms, the loss will not just be a percentage point or two of GDP, but the huge benefits of globalized markets and production chains, and the sharing of knowledge and breakthroughs that enable all countries to progress faster together. We should therefore do our utmost to avoid going down the path of conflict and causing enmity on both sides that will last for generations.
And turning to multilateralism, Mr. Lee said small countries can strengthen their collective influence by working together on economic cooperation, regional integration, and building up multilateral institutions. He said that although the US often acts unilaterally and prefers bilateral deals, Singapore cannot afford to adopt the same view as a small country.
Being small, we are naturally disadvantaged in bilateral negotiations. We need to reform and strengthen multilateral institutions, not cripple or block them. More fundamentally, confining ourselves to a bilateral approach means foregoing win-win opportunities which come from countries working together with more partners. And we need to build a broader regional and international architecture of cooperation. When groups of countries deepen their economic cooperation, they will enhance not just their shared prosperity, but also their collective security. And with more stake in one another's success, they'll have greater incentive to uphold a conducive and peaceful international order, which will benefit many countries, big and small.
And besides universal trade agreements, Mr. Lee said it is important to strive for regional deals, such as the Mega Free Trade Pact, the CPTPP. He hoped China and the US would consider joining it, even as more countries like the UK want to come on board. When it comes to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, Mr. Lee urged members to take the final step to complete the deal this year, or at least when the domestic politics of key players allow. But he said regional cooperation goes beyond trade and called ASEAN an effective platform for dialogue and cooperation.
ASEAN works on the basis of consensus. It makes more progress in some areas than others because ASEAN members are not immune to the strategic forces which pull us in different directions. This is the hard reality of cooperation in a region exposed to multiple external influences. Despite its limitations, ASEAN has contributed greatly to the well-being of its members and the security of the region, and ASEAN's partners recognize the value of ASEAN centrality.
Well, Mr. Lee said Singapore supports China's Belt and Road Initiative, calling it a constructive mechanism for China to be engaged with the region. He also highlighted Singapore's active role in promoting financial connectivity and providing legal services to countries involved. But he also called for the BRI to be economically sound and bring long-term benefits to partners.
Overall, the BRI must be open and inclusive and must not turn the region into a closed bloc centered on a single major economy. As Asian countries deepen their links with China, they also need to grow their ties with the US, Europe, Japan, and others. In other words, the BRI should help China to integrate with the world. The end result should be to strengthen globalization and not to divide the world into rival spheres of influence.
Wrapping up his speech, PM Lee said US-China ties will define the tenor of international relations for years to come. And while he thinks it is natural that they vie for power and influence, such competition should not inevitably lead to conflict.
We hope the US and China find a constructive way forward, competing certainly, but at the same time cooperating on major issues of mutual interest. To expect every country to adopt the same cultural values and political system is neither reasonable nor realistic. In fact, humankind's diversity is its strength. There is much we can learn from one another, from the differences in our values, perspectives, systems, and policies. The story of humankind's progress has been one of exchange of ideas and of continuous learning and adaptation.
Right, time now for a short break, but still ahead on News 5. Why LTA is not issuing licenses to e-scooter sharing operators just yet. And no rest till everyone is found. Search efforts continue for survivors of a deadly boat crash, but hope is dwindling.
My Mitsubishi Electric StarMax aircon saves me energy and money. It's easy to clean and is so quiet.
Ladies and gentlemen, right now I got to tell you about the fabulous, most groovy
South Fun, baby. A nice Singaporean boy.
They come in all shapes and sizes.
It's what we Singaporeans would describe as very rojak. That's a speciality, 99 variety.
Just don't bite off more than you can chew.
Is he a gone case?
It was just a game.
Be sure to catch our local boys on Lights, Camera, Singapore, Tuesdays at 10 on 5. You can also watch it on Toggle at the same time.
That is what I would do.
On Cine on 5, mutants have extraordinary links to the past, present, and future. And quite often, big troubles keep these X-Men busy, shuttling in time, while folks like Shrek and Fiona live happily forever after. But time changes everything. Shrek Forever After, X-Men First Class, and X-Men Days of Future Past.
This is a limited time offer.
3 time-honored spectacular movies, Friday to Sunday on 5.
I miss feeling glam. I love feeling glam all the time, man. And now I just smell like baby's milk. I'm not surprised if one day a client's gonna dump us because they smell stale milk on me.
Baby, got me down on my knees. Baby, got me begging you, please. Won't you meet me at the top of the stairs? You can run your fingers, baby, through my hair. Like the fire between us.
Ladies,
I think he's got enough glam for the two of you.
Stop it.
Lion Moms, Monday, 9:30 p.m. on 5. Co-sponsored by Simmons Beauty Rest, Sleep Performance, the new performance. Keep your friends close and your family closer. They may be the ones to help you find true love.
You listen to us and we turn you into an alpha male.
To get you home.
Let's go, baby!
To keep you safe. The Zookeeper, The Secret Life of Pets, San Andreas. Your holiday specials, Tuesday and Wednesday on 5.
she opened fried rice, paradise, nasi goreng. Very nice, that's a speciality. 99 varieties, fried rice, paradise.
Hello there, welcome back to News 5. The United States has reaffirmed its commitment to the Southeast Asian region and to work closely with ASEAN. Acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan said this in a series of meetings with Southeast Asian defense ministers in Singapore on the opening day of the Shangri-La Dialogue.
As tensions between the United States and China escalate further, this year's Shangri-La Dialogue couldn't have come at a more significant time. U.S.-China relations are expected to take center stage at the Security Forum, with a meeting between acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan and China's Defense Minister Wei Fenghe set to take place on the sidelines. Now, Mr. Shanahan had earlier told reporters in Jakarta that China remained his top defense priority, but also reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to the region. This was conveyed during a meeting between Mr. Shanahan and Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong at the Istana, where both countries reaffirmed their long-standing ties. And as seen earlier in the day from Mr. Shanahan's meeting with Singapore Defence Minister Ng Eng Hen, defence will feature strongly. Now, both men said they welcome the upcoming renewal of a 1990 agreement that allows U.S. forces to use Singapore's air and naval bases and sees the U.S. rotationally deploy its assets to Singapore for exercises. The renewal must be done by 2020 and will include partnership elements of the U.S. National Defense Strategy that was recently conveyed for the region. Now, this follows a meeting between Singapore and China on Wednesday, where both countries also agreed to update a defense agreement that could see them increase the scale of their military exercises. The agreement is expected to be signed later this year. The defense ministers also affirmed the need for stable defense relations between the US and China, particularly as trade tensions increase. And looking at both developments together, it points towards Singapore's consistent position on US and China that nobody needs to choose sides. Dr. Ng had said a few days ago that countries don't live in a unipolar or bipolar world. And the fact that Singapore has met with both sides, China and the US, shows the role it is trying to play here in helping to facilitate constructive cooperation between the two superpowers, especially on a platform like this security forum.
In other news, Hungarian police have detained the captain of a vessel that collided with a tour boat carrying South Korean tourists. This comes amid a criminal investigation into the disaster which happened on the Danube River on Wednesday night during heavy rain. At least 7 people are dead as search efforts continue for the 21 missing. South Korean crisis specialists are there to aid with the rescue mission. The foreign minister is there as well, and she says the operation will go on until the last person is found. Well, back home, there's been a 4th dengue death in Singapore this year. A 63-year-old man who lived at Hougang Avenue 1. The area is not an active dengue cluster, and authorities say vector control operations are being carried out and are urging residents and building owners to cooperate. Now, if you're looking forward to boarding a bus on demand, you'll probably have to wait a little bit longer. A 6-month trial will end in 2 weeks, but already authorities have determined that it will be too costly to scale up the service. The service involves using an app to book bus rides, and the trial found that this was more expensive than running regular buses because of high software development costs. The Land Transport Authority says larger scale deployment of such buses should be more cost-effective in future when the efficiency of algorithms improves. The system will also be more efficient when driverless buses are ready. As for passenger demand, a survey showed that around half of those who were aware of the service had tried it, but a significant group of commuters either didn't know about it or chose not to give it a go. There have been more than 26,000 rides so far.
Maybe we really didn't build up enough mass to be successful. You can see that for this kind of program work, then many of the buses has to be on the road for this kind of same model, and also the many people willing to try out. Simply trying out like 10 buses, 15 buses, which was the case, then it may be trying out whether this one is technically feasible, but it may not be able to reach the kind of economic mass to be able to reach the break-even.
The trial took place during off-peak hours in Joo Koon, Marina Downtown, and from the CBD to the east. LTA says after it ends, regular bus services will be optimized in Joo Koon and Marina Downtown. The Night Rider CBD service NR7 will be discontinued, but commuters still have the option of night owl buses. Now, meantime, LTA has delayed its decision to issue licenses to e-scooter sharing operators to the 3rd quarter of this year. It was supposed to do so this month, but LTA says it needs more time to look at imposing more requirements to ensure the safety of users and the general public. Under the current licensing framework, operators must meet conditions such as a maximum fleet size and managing indiscriminate parking. At least one expert says the delay could be due to concerns about the viability of such businesses and public concerns about safety. This in light of a recent spate of accidents involving e-scooter users.
Unless you are going to let user 100% responsible for the safety usage of the PMD, but company has to kind of step in for the safety. Every single measure is coming at some kind of a cost. So the LTA must review that how much of the safety they are going to impose as a mandatory for the company put in. But every single measure is going to be cost, so doing the business is going to be more expensive. So they have to see the balance between the two.
Right, coming up next on News 5, saving water by turning on the Waterworks. We take a look at PUB's tear-jerking short film.
Weather report brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric.
Next on Makan and Migrants.
Do you know anything about Sri Lankan cuisine?
A woman's quest to keep her native cuisine alive.
Chefs that cook such food are less and less even in Sri Lanka.
First thing that comes to anyone's mind, is it like an Indian curry? And it's not. Each family has their own secret ingredient. My recipe is my granny's.
Can Roshini's rice and curry bring new flavors to Singapore's food scene? On the Red Dot, tonight, 9:30 on Channel 5.
This is a turbulent time in the Philippines.
Rage against misogyny!
February 6 yun, pinatay yung anak ko nga isa, yung panganay. Yung isa naman August 13.
And the Filipino way of life is undergoing dramatic change.
The Catholic Church in Philippine societies today is at the crossroads.
My name is Ate Maralio. As a journalist, I've spent years covering breaking news.
Alam mo, illegal tong trabaho.
Ho, 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 ho. But now I want to dig a little deeper.
Shucks.
I'm traveling to the remotest parts of this archipelago. This island is living practically underwater.
Basura po!
Meeting the great and the good of the Philippines.
Tuloy ang laban.
To decipher what makes my country tick. Pakiramdam!
Unbelievable!
Deciphering the Philippines, premiering 12th of June on CNA.
मेरे बच्चों में जिन लोग मेरे सामने आग लगा दी गई मेरी बहन को आग हवाले को देगा
Families out here are just surviving with very little food and very little water.
大多数的新加坡人到了晚上跟他之前判若两人。
Seriously, I cried to see my son's skin on my finger.
Do you think that you can live life right now without a smartphone?
No,
not at all.
You are fake news.
Russian media disseminate not facts, not news, but propaganda.
Life is hilarious. Make the best of it.
Abandon the notion that in our complex world today, we can predict and control the future.
Welcome back to News 5. Manufacturing firms will get more customized skills training through company training committees made up of their own workers and union leaders. This is under a deal among the labour movement. Over 30 companies and 7 unions in the sector, which faces rapid technological changes.
Singapore's move to Industry 4.0 will need more than just robotics and automation. The labour movement says such technological disruption needs more targeted upskilling for workers in the manufacturing sector. And with the MOU, it will help those on board get help to set up company training committees. These comprise mostly workers and unionists who know best their learning needs to look for customized training.
What we can do ourselves is to prepare our workers, our companies, to be ready for the technology disruption. And this requires detailed planning at a company level. It also requires us to work together as an ecosystem between the tripartite partners, between the institutions of learning, so that we can actually provide a good framework and ecosystem to uplift the skills of our workforce.
Oh, this is a very good plan for our company because everybody talking about digital transformations, all right? And we find that the most challenges is people. All right, and hardware, software, infrastructure, the one you can just invest, you can buy, but the people are not ready, then you won't get the result.
The labour movement says such CTC-led training could increase productivity and grow wages. Some courses available include using robotic software and the use of intelligent systems.
Through the CTC, through the training, they feel the understanding that, hey, instead of me being replaced by the robots, I can actually handle robots. I can give you an example that when we use the robots to do some machine repair, the workers or the technicians who used to do it manually by himself, now he's operating the machine, the robots, to do it in half the time, and it's safer and with even better quality.
The MOU signing happened alongside a career fair at the David Nair Institute for Employment and Employability. A first of its kind, it showcased training opportunities and more than 500 jobs.
And finally, National Water Agency PUB's first festive short film has turned on the Waterworks for many viewers. Produced in celebration of Hari Raya Puasa, the 6-minute video is part of PUB's year-long water conservation campaign. Well, Kinship tells the story of these two brothers, Din and Zul, who grew up in an orphanage in the 1960s. Initially inseparable, their relationship soured when one brother was adopted, leaving the other behind. Well, fast forward to present day, Din returns to the reservoir where they used to hang out and stumbles upon a message Zul left for him. But it doesn't just induce tears. Water-saving tips are also woven into the film. PUB says the film was inspired by the Malay proverb, water doesn't break apart when you chop it. And that's it from us on News 5. Join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.
Download the Toggle app now and catch up for free. Tonight on 5.
I was born in Colombo, in Sri Lanka.